Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, September the 5th, 2025. Today there is an exact square between Mars and Jupiter. I've been talking about this aspect a lot in my recent videos, and I want to look at this aspect in detail, consider some of the ways it might impact us, and also look at a few people who have Mars-Jupiter squares in their horoscopes. I also want to look at the astrology of this furnicular accident in Lisbon. So this furnicular, which is this sort of car on cables going up a very sort of steep hill, and it had a terrible accident. I think the furnicular fell from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill. I think up to 17 people have been killed so far, and I think it was a major tragedy in Portugal. And I did look at the astrology of the event, and there were certainly some things going on, and I will also be looking at this aside from the Mars-Jupiter square. But before I look at all that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, September the 5th, 2025. So here is the chart for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate, and you will see that the moon is still in Aquarius. The moon is right in the middle of Aquarius, and it is making a trine to Mars. So moon trine Mars is an okay aspect. It's quite energetic, and with the moon and Mars in air signs, this might mean that there's a fair amount to say. And we shouldn't forget also that Mercury and Uranus are still making a square aspect. Okay, it's starting to separate. It's nearly 5 degrees apart, but that might sort of emphasize the verbal side of things. And so, we might want to talk about our ideas. Even if we don't want to talk about our ideas, we might make comments, and our thoughts may be very active with moon in Aquarius. And moon in Aquarius is often regarded as being a fairly sort of independent placement. We want to do things our way, and it's then sort of worth noting that the moon is making an opposition to Venus as well as a trine to Mars. So moon opposition Venus. Well, moon in Aquarius perhaps wants to do things its way, and Venus is about relationships, and so maybe other people can just be too much of a good thing, and so we really might value our own company. Although we could look at it in a different way and say that the moon is opposition Venus, it's making a trine to Mars, so the moon in a way could be bringing Venus and Mars together, remembering that Venus and Mars are starting to make a sextile aspect to each other. I mean, it'll be some time before that Venus-Mars sextile is exact, but perhaps there is, if we're very positive, a Venus-Mars sextile feel to the day. Maybe events can bring us and other people together. It wasn't perhaps what we intended, but it could happen. Though the main aspect today, the one I've been talking about for ages, is a square between Mars and Jupiter. So here it is. We've got Mars at 1857 Libra, Jupiter at 1842 Cancer. At least that's the position at noon New York time. And so, Mars square Jupiter is a high energy aspect. Mars wants to assert itself. It can be quite an angry influence, certainly assertive. And then Jupiter wants to make things bigger. There is something potentially excessive about Jupiter. So Mars square Jupiter, we can take things too far. If we look at some of the people who have got Mars square Jupiter in their horoscopes, I mean, then we can see this, and at the end of this video I'll be looking at a few famous people or infamous people who have got Mars square Jupiter, and by and large there is a common theme of excessiveness. So to be honest, I'm still trying to work out how it is that Kamala Harris has Mars square Jupiter in her horoscope. I don't know. It doesn't quite fit, but I'll have a look at Kamala Harris's chart amongst others later in the video. And additionally, we've got Venus quintile Uranus. And so there is Venus and there's Uranus. You see they're 72 degrees apart. Now you might say that Venus quintile Uranus is about other people, and it's about looking for interesting relationships that are unusual. And so that might be our attitude. Certainly if we're feeling sociable, and not all of us are going to feel sociable, but we're looking for something exciting from others. We're not looking for the usual crowd. And perhaps with a quintile, we're trying to force the pace. We might want to do something unusual in order to find what we're looking for. So some people might respond to that Venus quintile Uranus by going somewhere they've never been before, socializing with people who are completely new, because they're deliberately trying to create some excitement. Another way of looking at Venus quintile Uranus is to see it as being artistic. Venus is a planet that's connected with harmony and art and what things look like. And so Venus quintile Uranus might be us making a special effort to look interesting and unique. That might be in terms of the way we dress, or it could be about our artistic output. So if we are of an artistic bent, then it might be a great time to be really creating something that is outstanding, perhaps, certainly unusual. So that's the geocentric position for today, set for New York. Looking at the chart for Sydney, the moon is still in Aquarius. So if you're in Australasia, East Asia, the moon is in Aquarius. There's no lunar differences between the two regions, and the moon is it's making an opposition to Venus. That trine between the moon and Mars that I was talking about with reference to sort of New York, perhaps the Americas, Europe, it's perhaps not such a big deal. That moon trine Mars is not quite there. It's 10 degrees apart, so it might not be until tomorrow that you feel the full power of that moon trine Mars. And instead, the main lunar aspect is moon opposition Venus. And so moon opposition Venus, it might be that some people just are annoying, and you can't avoid them, but they're irritating. Perhaps you're concerned that some people have a high opinion of themselves, or they're talking too much about their own stuff, and that's just not something you really want to bother with. But I don't want to exaggerate it. And the point is, the moon is in Aquarius, so wherever you are, whether you're in Australia or the United States, it's important to safeguard your own independence. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. I have to say that the Mars-Jupiter trine, which I've been, another thing that I've been going on and on about. That is the problem about doing daily videos rather than weekly videos, that some things just persist day in, day out, like this Mars-Jupiter trine, a heliocentric trine. And so that means that I talk about them day in, day out. And I don't think I need to say much more about Mars-Jupiter trine. I think it complements or intensifies the Mars-Jupiter square heliocentrically, and yeah, it's still very much there. The grand trine is now separating. The Earth is moving away from its trines to Mars and to Mars and Jupiter. So that's probably the main thing going on. Oh, Mercury is making a square to Mars. So Mercury square Mars heliocentrically. Well, I mean, it is a time, I've already said, that people have got a lot to say. There's a lot that people want to talk about. People have very active minds. Perhaps you have got an active mind. But if you have got an active mind, think about what you're actually trying to achieve. There's no point in just having just ideas for the sake of it. You've got to have ideas that are of importance and significance. Those ideas are available, but you have to find them. You have to look for them. And it may be that you have to put yourself in a space, where, the universe, the cosmos is talking to you, so that you can sort of reflect back to the world around you what the universe is telling you. I know that sounds rather mediumistic. I'm not really suggesting anything like that. Okay, maybe if you've got psychic abilities, mediumistic abilities, then you might find it particularly easy to express the universal will. But most of us might find it hard work. But there is lots to say. But to just make sure that what you say is meaningful, and just it's not a time for just talking for the sake of it. So now I'm going to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, September the 5th, 2025. Aries, it's now exact. There is an exact Mars-Jupiter square. So Jupiter is making a 90-degree aspect to Mars. Your Mars is in Libra, and this could be motivating if we look at it in the most positive way. It may feel, Aries, that something just wants you to act. And now is your chance, now is your time. And if you are going to do anything, it's important that you do it in the right way. And it's not a time to be frustrated or to lash out. You must do whatever feels easiest and most natural. And you might be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Mars. So moon trine Mars indicates to me that there are ways of expressing yourself, asserting yourself, which are just very easy, and they needn't be traumatic. It's just obvious what needs to be done. But Mars is making a square to Jupiter at the same time. And so with a square, there's always going to be a degree of, tension. It's almost like there has to be tension. You're almost looking for something to challenge you. That it may be that action without resistance might not seem reasonable. What do I mean by that? If you just act in a way that's just easy and you do what comes naturally, it may still feel unsatisfactory, because it would be better at some level if you were in some form of conflict. Now, I know you don't want conflict, but at some level you do, because you need something to push against. But the question is, do you really need something to push against? And if you have an opportunity to do something easily and naturally, then I would suggest you just go ahead and do it, within reason. You shouldn't take risks. You shouldn't do anything that is illegal or immoral. But if something is easy and is not going to cause any harm, then that's what you should go for. And don't underestimate other people. There is a social dimension here, because Mars is in Libra, it's in your opposite sign, and it just may be that the easiest way to get something done at the moment is to enlist other people's support and their help. Now, you might not think that that help and support is available. You might think that everyone is out to stop you, but this is not necessarily the case. And also the moon is in Aquarius, trine Mars, and the moon in Aquarius, it's independent-minded for sure, but at the same time it can be very sociable. And just don't underestimate the people around you. The people around you can be there for you. So friends, associates, other people who you perhaps don't normally have much to do with, they can be of assistance. So I know that Aries is a very independent-minded sign, but you don't have to be completely independent. And in many cases, the most successful initiatives today are going to be the ones that you take with other people, with their support and assistance. Though Mars square Jupiter can be destructive. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And it's not a day for doing anything that is careless, that you haven't thought through, that involves risk. And if you do, I'm not saying anything will go wrong, but it could go wrong. Or perhaps the chances of it going wrong are going to be higher than usual. And I say that in a non-statistical way. I mean, the concept of probability is mathematical, but I'm also aware that there is zero statistical evidence that astrology works. I mean, I know that you've got the Gogolab findings, but I'm not particularly convinced by the Gogolab findings, and I think that statistics is not going to establish the validity of astrology, probably ever. And so when I say the chances of something going wrong are higher than usual, I mean that, but I don't mean that statistically. And that might sound completely illogical, but there is an illogical side to astrology. And yeah, I do, of course, believe in astrology. I know astrology works, but still, its provability is marginal to non-existent. So that says something about today. Don't forget your mind and your ideas. At the moment, your mind is very active, and Aries, you've got some great ideas, and so perhaps because you've got great ideas, you might think that you want to act on these ideas. What's the point in an idea just lying there doing nothing? Okay. It's pointless. I mean, that can be an Aries perspective. I'm sort of saying that from a Gemini viewpoint, me having my sun in Gemini, and I'm kind of aware of the sort of friction. Well, there's no real friction between sun in Aries and sun in Gemini, or Aries rising. But Aries is about action, Gemini is about ideas, and ideas for you on their own are not entirely satisfactory. So, what do you do with your ideas? Well, you don't necessarily have to act on these ideas today. You have to ask yourself, whether there is the right pathway to act. And it may be that, if you have great ideas, that you can just write them down and you can start waiting for an opportunity to put them into action. But I don't think that anything you absolutely have to do today. Taurus. It's a day when you continue to be quite ambitious. You understand, Taurus, that you do have definite priorities. There are things that you want to do, and you know that the sooner you get them done, the better. But you're also aware of the things that could hold you up, hold you back. And in spite of your ambition, you might find that there are other things taking up your time. And this relates to the fact that there's an opposition between the moon and Venus. Venus is in Leo. Venus is, well, right in the middle of Leo. And so with Venus here, opposition to the moon, part of you wants to do nothing, wants to just keep things as it is, and you're happy where you are. But on the other hand, that's not reasonable. That there are other things to sort out, and that you want to assert yourself, and you want to be noticed, and perhaps you want to demonstrate to everyone, not just how clever you are, but that you can be, independent-minded, and that you can do something, off your own bat. And so, Taurus, it's important that you respect your own needs, and you have a need to sort of ground yourself, and you don't have to be taking risks, but also you want to be having an impact. You want to be making waves, and you can. And the moon in Aquarius makes a trine to Mars in Libra, and this might indicate, Taurus, that there are things you really can do. You can make progress in your own way, and you don't have to do anything disruptive. You don't have to take risks. You don't have to do anything stupid. In fact, it's the opposite. Through a sensible approach, doing one thing after another, Taurus, you are going to slowly but surely move towards the achievement of your short-term goals without causing any disruption. And at the same time, Taurus, you're going to be good at explaining yourself. Sometimes you might be asked questions, why are you doing what you're doing? And you don't have to assume a conflict. You can just explain it as it is, and your explanations and the power of your explanations, will make good sense and will allow you, I think in most cases, to make really smooth progress. Now, as far as other people are concerned and relationships, you could argue that Venus is sextile Mars. Now, Venus is at 13 Leo, Mars is at 18, 19 Libra. So that is a long way off. That's over 5-degree orb. I don't use a 5-degree orb for my sextiles. I expect them to be much closer than that. But you could then say that the moon is bringing Venus and Mars together, because the moon is making an opposition to Venus, and then it makes a trine to Mars. So it could be that circumstances bring you and someone else together, allow you to form a closer relationship, not necessarily a romantic relationship. It could be a professional relationship, a situation where you and another person have just got a lot to do with one another. And that might be to do with the fact that you have a common goal or a common purpose. And so, whatever it is, don't feel that you need to be estranged from anyone. And, your efforts to make an impression and your ambition makes you a more interesting person. And the more you can demonstrate that ambition, the better for everyone. Though I should point out, as far as relationships are concerned, that Mars is making an exact square to Jupiter today. And of course, in the Taurus chart, Mars is often connected with relationships because Mars rules Scorpio, and Scorpio is your opposite sign. So Mars is square Jupiter. So that might say something about another person's behavior. It could be that there is someone who is being quite excessive. They're taking something too far. Maybe they're over-obsessed about something. can you be over-obsessed? I mean, obsession is generally considered to be not a good thing. Well, no, a little bit of obsession is fine. So I think you can be over-obsessed. And so if someone who is really, really concerned that something is done right, but they take it too far, and they perhaps even try to involve you in it, and this might indicate that some people are just too much to handle. Even people you know well, people you like, people who have been trustworthy in the past, who haven't let you down, even then they can be annoying. So, if someone is annoying you, they just won't stop, whatever it is, then, you have to decide perhaps, on the best approach. And, the best approach might be to ignore them. Or if they're doing something dangerous, Mars square Jupiter is a dangerous aspect. It can be a dangerous aspect. And it's a dangerous aspect that I don't think impacts you directly, but I think you might observe other people doing things or planning things that might not, strictly speaking, be advisable. So under those circumstances, you may need to intervene and perhaps bring someone down to earth without completely repressing them. People do not want to be imprisoned today. People value their freedom, and you have to respect that. But at the same time, you don't want people to do anything that damages themselves or other people. Gemini. Mercury is still making a square to Uranus. I mean, that square between Mercury and Uranus, well, it happened some time ago. And it's now, sort of 5 degrees apart. But I think that, it's still there. There can be moments, Gemini, when you say things that you hadn't necessarily thought through. It just happens. And a reminder here that, of course, Uranus is still moving through Gemini, and at some level, Gemini, you want action, and you want excitement, and you want disruption even. I mean, part of you doesn't want disruption. Part of you wants everything to be completely shipshape, be in control. You know what's going on from one day to another. That's part of you, but there's still a side to you that is looking for variety, and you can't help yourself. So the reason I'm mentioning this Mercury squared Uranus is that it kind of feeds onto the Mars-Jupiter square. So we've got a Mars-Jupiter square today, exact Mars-Jupiter square. And this Mars-Jupiter square is on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. In other words, Jupiter is still... how does this work? Yeah, Jupiter is still conjunct the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. Mars is also aspecting the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. So this Mars-Jupiter square is going to stir you up, and it's going to sort of remind you that you do want to do things differently. And yeah, you are capable of being very disruptive, even though disruption isn't necessarily what you want. And don't forget that Mercury is in Virgo, and from a Gemini viewpoint, Virgo is a very down-to-earth sign. It's about you creating some degree of stability for yourself, and perhaps even sort of valuing your domestic environment and your family and the things that are constant in your life. But nonetheless, Gemini is not entirely happy with that and is looking for change. And I think that the Mars-Jupiter square might encourage you to take things too far. And so, where would you take things too far? Well, you could take things too far in many directions, but Mars is in Libra, and Mars in Libra, you want to do things your way. I mean, you're a Gemini. Geminis always want to do things their way at some level, even if they don't want to have a big fight about it. You want to do things your way. You want to do something that is a fundamental expression of who you are. But, in the process, you might feel that other things are necessary. You may, in certain cases, find yourself spending money or wanting to spend money to support your creativity or to support your desire for excitement and adventure and variety. So that is one possibility. So it's not a day when you should be, tempted to sort of spend money on things which probably are not necessary. You might think they're necessary at the time, but in retrospect, you'll realize that it was a waste. It wasn't really furthering your creative potential. And maybe instead, Gemini, you should focus on the fact that the moon is in Aquarius and it's trine Mars. So that moon in Aquarius trine Mars is having an influence on your sign. So the moon in Aquarius is trining the whole sign of Gemini. Mars is also trining the whole sign of Gemini. So that moon Mars trine can be quite elevating and can show you new possibilities which are just there, which don't have to be paid for. You just can see it. And if you don't fully understand something, you can read about it, you can ask about it, and the information will be there. It's all available to you. And you might then feel a greater sense of purpose. And feeling a sense of purpose is important for every Gemini. Geminis often have their doubts. They're always doubting. What is the purpose? I mean, that can be a common Gemini question, but I think that it is a time when you can start to see, what it's all about and, where you are supposed to be going. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, I would possibly suggest that you de-emphasize them, unless you're dealing with something that is just really fun, that doesn't have any intensity or emotional depth. I know that Gemini is not the most emotional sign in the world. Of course, every sign is emotional, but the emotional side of things right now is not really very strong. And getting too close to anyone, especially on an emotional or a sort of interpersonal level, it's just not necessarily going to work. And you might feel that some of your emotions are just trapped, or perhaps there's going to be emotional pressure. If you're pressured to show your feelings, you're not going to be too happy about it. And so, Gemini, as far as relationships are concerned, you need to recognize who you are and what your short-term limitations are. I think that is important. Cancer, the moon continues moving through Aquarius, and in Aquarius you are being quite sort of independent-minded, like yesterday. You want to do things your way, and you're not really going to be in the mood for listening to other people. I mean, why should you want to listen to other people? It's not going to really be very helpful, useful, or even reassuring. And the moon is making an opposition to Venus, and so you could say moon opposition Venus. Well, some people want attention, and they're asking for your time. But with moon opposition Venus, you see the problem, and it's attention that you don't want to give. You can give some attention. You can acknowledge someone's existence, but I don't think you necessarily have to go much further than that. And it's better, Taurus. It's better, Cancer, that you think about yourself and what is important to you. And the Moon in Aquarius does make a trine to Mars, so it makes, having made the opposition to Venus, it makes a trine to Mars, and that trine to Mars, it's a good aspect, provided it's handled in the right way. It's an aspect that is, very much about you and your own interests, and it might relate to your home and your family. So you know what's important, and you know what's important for other people. And when I'm talking about other people, I'm talking about people who are really close to you, people like your family, and you know what they need, and you also know what you are capable of giving. I mean, you're not going to today be completely open and free in terms of what you give out. You're going to be quite careful, and that's a good thing. And as far as your home is concerned, with Moon trine Mars, you're able to concentrate on making things better, improving things, maybe even home improvement. I mean, it's the beginning of September. We've got a sort of a seasonal change coming up. The solstice is now getting closer and closer. It's less than 3 weeks before the solstice, and whether you're in the equinox. The equinox is less than 3 weeks away. Whether it's the beginning of spring or the beginning of autumn. If you're, of course, in the northern hemisphere, it's the beginning of autumn. The southern hemisphere, the beginning of spring. But it is a time of change, and you want to make sure you're preparing for the change of seasons. And so that might be how the Moon trine Mars is working. Now, another aspect we do have, arguably the main aspect of the day, is Mars square Jupiter. This Mars square Jupiter, it's a major event, and it does highlight, what is important to you. Mars in Libra. Where are you putting your energy? I think a lot of Cancerians are putting their energy into their home, into creating roots for themselves, and that is important to you. And you might be doing it in quite an aggressive way. Aggressive in the sense that you want to distance yourself from certain other people. That's the difference between Mars and Venus. Mars is a planet which wants to make things different, wants to emphasize separation, whereas Venus is looking for community, union, the togetherness. And so with Mars in Libra, part of you, Cancer, is just aware of how you are different. Where are your boundaries? Where does your property end and someone else's property start? It doesn't matter whether you're renting or whether you own your own home. There's still the territory that you have control over, whether it's short-term control over long-term control. So you're aware of that distinction. And with Mars square Jupiter, well, Jupiter could just emphasize it, because Jupiter, whatever it touches, it makes it bigger, makes it more intense, makes it more powerful. And so there could be some exaggeration there. You might sort of exaggerate those boundaries. You might exaggerate those differences. And so that would be a negative side, potentially, of Mars square Jupiter. But, Jupiter is a fortunate planet. It's in Cancer. It's in your sign. And so perhaps the challenge here, Cancer, is to look beyond things. It's good that you are creating a structure for yourself. It's good that you're giving yourself security, and that you're basically creating a space for yourself. but it can be taken too far, and perhaps Jupiter is the challenge. Jupiter is asking you to go beyond your immediate environment, beyond that perhaps that sort of patch of dirt that you're defending. We all have our patches of dirt, and so you go beyond that and to see a wider perspective, and also to see how your security and your groundedness can reflect on other people. Not everyone is feeling secure, not everyone is feeling comfortable, and one side of the Cancer personality, the best side of Cancer of the Cancer personality is about looking after other people. That's not about giving people money, for example. And so that challenges what I was saying right at the beginning. This is a day when you value your independence, when you want to be separate. And that's how you want it to be. But Mars square Jupiter is challenging that. And it's nothing to do with what you have to do today with this Mars square Jupiter. It's just a reminder that, once you've sorted yourself out, I mean, I'm sure you have sorted yourself out, but when perhaps once you've sorted yourself out to your complete satisfaction, then you have to consider the wider world and what you can do to perhaps make other people feel more comfortable. Leo. There is, of course, a square between Mars and Jupiter. I think that this Mars square Jupiter is going to affect everyone, you included, and one aspect of this Mars square Jupiter might be about what you have to say for yourself, and you do feel that something needs to be said, and perhaps you've in the past you haven't been as expressive as you could have been, and with Mars square Jupiter, it might feel that now is the time, and perhaps something has been building up, and you've been thinking about things, and you've been wondering what you should have been doing, and with Mars square Jupiter, you can now perhaps say something important. And you don't have to do it in a dramatic way. I mean, the temptation is to do it in a dramatic way because it is Mars square Jupiter. Mars square Jupiter is an excessive aspect. But you might find that you can tell people things in a way that is reasonable. It doesn't have to be dramatic. And, you can have dry powder. You can be ready to be dramatic, but I don't think you have to be dramatic. And I think that people can understand what you are saying, and you're perhaps helped by the fact that the Moon is making a trine to Mars. The Moon is in Aquarius. The Moon is in your opposite sign, and so Moon trine Mars may just allow you to to say what's on your mind. And also, you might find that other people are surprisingly supportive. Once you start trying to say something, once you start trying to do something, you might not think that you've got what it takes to see it through to completion, but then other people are prepared to take over. You start something, and then someone else is prepared to finish it. So it's important, Leo, that you don't regard yourself today as being alone. You absolutely don't have to be alone. I think that there is plenty of support there for you, though the Moon in Aquarius is making an opposition to Venus, and that Moon opposition Venus is likely to be about relationships and about the challenges of relationships. Venus is in Leo, right in the middle of Leo, and that's about perhaps you and how you present yourself. You can present yourself in quite a dramatic way, but it seems to clash with with other people. So it's like other people certainly are there for you, but certain relationships just seem to be uncomfortable, and in order to make them work, it might feel that you have to exaggerate a bit, take things too far. Or perhaps everyone is trying to exaggerate, and there is a danger here that there might be a lack of sincerity, that people are pretending to be things that they're not, and that's going to stand in the way of real communication, real togetherness. And so perhaps, Leo, you have to make a special effort to sort of bring things down to earth and to be real. Don't pretend anything. I think there is a temptation to pretend, but if you pretend, you're just you're fueling the illusion, and there can be no connectedness, and that is, I think, unnecessary. And once you start, by the way, once you start on something, once you start doing something, once you start on a particular course, it's going to be difficult to stop. So talking about illusion, if you sort of play games and you pretend to be someone you're not, once you start doing it, you'll just potentially carry on doing it, and it just could become more and more intense and more intractable. Now, Leo, as I've already suggested, this needn't happen. You can change things. You're in the perfect position to change things. If you're not happy about the way things are going, if you think that people are being fake, if you think that unnecessary roadblocks are being placed, then you can do something about it. You can say something about it. And Leo, once you decide that something has to be done, that something has to change, then Leo, you can really have a very powerful impact. Once you make the decision, and it's a decision you don't necessarily have to take, but if you feel that things are stuck and that you're looking for movement, then I think that through your own willpower you can really push things through. Virgo. Mercury is still making a square to Uranus. I've talked about this Mercury square Uranus for some time, and of course Mercury is your ruler, and Mercury and Uranus, they're 5 degrees apart, but at some level you are looking for a change. You're looking for variety. Remember, Mercury is in Virgo. It's in your sign. It's a very communicative Mercury, and it's a very strong Mercury. And so perhaps that's a reason why that Mercury-Uranus square is persisting. And you can certainly get noticed. And if you want to create change, if you want to be disruptive, you certainly can be. And it's sort of boosted by the fact that we have this square between Mars and Jupiter. So Mars and Jupiter, is an important aspect. It's about excess. It's about taking something too far. It's about, well, that's from a negative viewpoint. On a positive note, it's just about energy, being motivated to make things happen. And this Mars square Jupiter is tied in with Mercury square Uranus. So the reason it's tied in is that Mars is both Mars and Jupiter are aspecting the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. So Jupiter is on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. Mars is aspecting the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. And so the fact that there's a Mars-Jupiter square, it really brings this Mercury-Uranus square back into the center of things. And so, if you want to be a disruptor, if you're not happy with the way things are going, Virgo, you certainly can create the change. And maybe that's your role. things do need to move on. Some people are feeling stuck. They can't move. But you are someone who really is able to get things moving, and you do it through the force of your personality. I don't think you do it through your emotions or through subtle manipulations. I mean, your emotional abilities at the moment, if we really can talk about emotional abilities, are not particularly good. I don't think that right now, Virgo, you're particularly warm and fuzzy. Not really. There's something about you that is a bit difficult. You're nervous, you're tense, and just relaxing and getting close to someone and enjoying someone else's company and enjoying meaningful silences. I don't think that's going to happen today. I think that there is something about you, Virgo, that is tough and maybe even insensitive. Maybe there are things going on emotionally that you're not going to pick up on, and that may not be a bad thing. If things are complicated emotionally, if there are these sort of unspoken things going on that you're supposed to pick up on, well, that can just bring everything to a halt. And yeah, it's certainly true that one can be oversensitive. Yeah, let other people be sensitive, let other people emote, but try not to be part of it, though do understand it. You can understand other people's emotions, you can see other people being emotional, and you can respect that, but yeah, you don't have to participate, because if you were to participate, you would not be on strong ground. At worst, you could be, straying onto someone else's territory, use it on someone else's rules. So the emotional side of things, at worst, could be a trap, and you need to think about yourself. And so I know that sounds a bit harsh, but you have to go with your strengths. And today, Virgo, your main strength is your vibrancy, your ideas, your ability to disrupt, and not just take things at face value. And you can say things, do things which force people to take notice of you, and maybe you can really start to sort of harness that Mars Jupiter square. It is a big deal, that Mars Jupiter square, and harness it for your own purposes. Don't fall for it. Don't let other people control the energy of that Mars square Jupiter. If you look at that Mars square Jupiter, it might say something about another person's behavior. There are many ways of looking at that Mars Jupiter square, and it could say something about another person's behavior. It could say that someone else is being excessive, someone else is being irresponsible, perhaps financially irresponsible, and that's not what you want. And you may, in certain situations, have to stand up to someone you know very well, someone you care about, but you can see that perhaps they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. And if you make your position clear, you make your views clear, it might not be entirely easy, but it's probably the right thing to do. So if you see something is wrong today, then I think in most cases you should be absolutely open about it, because you don't want to just allow something to just happen, which is someone to make a mistake. They're making a mistake, but you don't want to intervene. Well, that would be unnecessary. So if you need to intervene, Virgo, in most situations it's probably the right thing to do. Libra. Today, Mars is exactly square Jupiter, and the Mars-Jupiter square is a bit of a two-edged sword. It can be very dynamic. It can be very action-orientated. It is a time to make things happen. On the other hand, one can take things too far. It can be very excessive, and it can just keep asserting itself, keep being energetic, and it just goes on and on and on, and it can lash out, it can be quite vicious, and it can get itself into a whole load of trouble. And this Mars square Jupiter certainly affects you. I mean, Mars is in Libra, and it's square Jupiter. Jupiter is in Cancer. Libra and Cancer are obviously important signs for you. They're both cardinal. And so the question is, how are you going to use this Mars square Jupiter? And how is it likely to impact you? And do you have a choice? I mean, you have Mars in Libra at the moment, and so with Mars moving through Libra, that does indicate that you can look after yourself. You can be assertive, and people will listen to you, and in many cases they will do things your way. I mean, have you found that yet? If you tell people what to do, if you provide an example, then I think in many cases people will follow this example. So that is a real positive, this Mars in Libra. And it's square Jupiter. Jupiter is in Cancer. Jupiter is in a high profile sector of your chart, often connected with success and accomplishment. And so with this Mars square Jupiter, if you find something that is important to you and you're prepared to give it your best shot, then I do think that you can really be very successful. And if you're working, not just today, but at the moment, first half of September even, if you're working, this Mars Jupiter square can really work for you, and it can allow you to make the most of everything you've got and to make a powerful impression. And it's therefore important that you are very clear. You don't spend too long trying to compromise, trying to do things other people's way. You could, but I think that would be unsatisfactory, and you would perhaps be missing an opportunity. So do use the energy, or try to use the energy of this Mars Jupiter square. It's there for you, and it can really work, but you have to be very dynamic and focused, and you can't scatter your energy. That's important. If you've got Mars square Jupiter and you're getting into lots of different things, and you're trying this and you're trying that, well, it's not going to get anywhere. Likewise, if you're a stereotypical Libra and you try to make everyone happy, well, that Mars square Jupiter is just could potentially be a disaster. So decide what you want and what is important to you. And Libra, be very uncompromising about your individuality. That does matter. You have to do something that it's all about you, not in a way that is self-obsessed. It's just recognizing that it is all about you right now, that you have got something to offer. And perhaps in the past you'd spent time listening to others and doing things their way, but that's not the right approach at the moment. I mean, it is a challenge. I mean, there is an opposition aspect at the moment between the Moon and Venus, and Venus is of course your ruler, and this Moon opposition Venus could be about what is important to you and what is important to other people, and how you negotiate it. And you somehow need to negotiate it in such a way that you are in control, but you don't upset anyone. Can you do that? And if you're upsetting people, or if you think you might be upsetting people, then just don't worry about it. Then just go somewhere else. Focus on different people. Because you can't spend all your time sort of worrying what other people are going to do, what other people are going to say. But I think it's possible, Libra, but if you use your various social skills, that you can get everyone onto your side without giving anything away. And I think that is very important, that you don't give things away. And this Mars square Jupiter could say something about relationships, as I think I said yesterday. Mars is ruler of Aries. It's ruler of your opposite sign, and Mars in Libra could represent a person who really is almost enthralled by you. They might think you're wonderful, or they might think you're important, and they're certainly being pulled towards you. So do have your eyes open. Who is being pulled towards you? Who is almost in your shadow? And someone could be in your shadow. And if someone is in your shadow, well, you might not notice them. And so do think about who that person might be. And because Mars is square Jupiter, someone may be trying to get your attention in perhaps an exaggerated way. So if you see extreme behavior by another person, someone then ask yourself, what is this extreme behavior? And the extreme behavior might just be that they want attention. And once they want attention, well, then you can decide how to respond. But you can respond how you like, but you also have to remember that it is a day when your agenda matters. It's not a day, as I've said on several occasions, it's not a day for compromising. Scorpio, your ruling planet is Mars, and Mars is square Jupiter. And this Mars square Jupiter is an aspect which has been close for quite a long time, and it's not just a one-day wonder. Yes, Mars square Jupiter is exact today, but it was pretty close yesterday, and it's going to be pretty close tomorrow. And so with Mars square Jupiter, you are being challenged to go beyond yourself. You really mustn't be satisfied with the way things are right now. I mean, it's good to be satisfied. It's nice to think that there is no pressure. There's nothing more that you have to do. But, you don't want to be complacent. And you should think that there is a new way of expressing yourself. But it's always got to be within limits, within certain bounds. I mean, because if you try to sort of express yourself in numerous different ways, if you regard absolutely everything as being important, well, then you're never going to get anywhere, and you're just going to get completely exhausted. So, do Scorpio, decide what is important. And I think there's just one thing that matters probably, and one thing, it's important, and you just give it everything. And in the process, it might seem that you're being quite obsessive, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being obsessive, provided you're obsessed with the right thing. I mean, that's always the point, isn't it? I mean, we kind of have to be obsessed, because if we're not obsessed, we are not committed to anything. We're not tying ourselves to anything, and we can just sort of float free and get nowhere. So perhaps you need to think about, what is worth getting obsessed about? And I think that there's one thing that you can be obsessed about. I mean, I'm not telling you what it is. I mean, you can work that out for yourself. And it's possibly something, quite private, something that you're not necessarily talking about to everyone. I mean, I don't want to talk about dark obsessions, dark, emotional, unhealthy obsessions. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an activity, a goal, something you really want to achieve, something you're getting ready to roll out, something you want to show the world in the end, but you're not quite ready for it. And so with Mars square Jupiter, you might feel that it's just time to time to do some preparation and prepare for something in a very obsessed way. And that might be the pattern, for the next couple of weeks. And so, you don't have to reveal it, and especially now, when the moon is in Aquarius. Moon is in Aquarius, which is a very low profile part of your chart. It doesn't want to say too much. It's to do with your own private world, and the moon in Aquarius is making a trine to Mars, and that suggests to me that there are things you want to do on your own, in your own space, and provided that they are useful and they're not just some sort of emotional dead end. I mean, you don't want an emotional dead end, but there is that possibility. Don't get too caught up on your emotions. With Moon in Aquarius, Mars square Jupiter, you could just go round and round and round, thinking about something, obsessing about something in a way that is not useful. But that's not something you want to do, Scorpio, and I don't think that it is necessary. And do think about your own brain and what your brain is coming up with. Your ideas. It is a time, Scorpio, when you can have some really incredible ideas. These ideas can just appear from nowhere. And so, Scorpio, if something occurs to you that at first it doesn't seem reasonable, it seems illogical, it seems impossible, don't just cast it to one side. Something is maybe trying to talk to you and give you the impetus to not just to plan something, but to actually do it as well. And when we looked at the heliocentric chart, don't forget that heliocentrically Mars is still trine Jupiter. Mars, your ruler, trine Jupiter. Jupiter heliocentrically, might represent some sort of universal cosmic force that is giving you information if you want to listen, to that. And so, Scorpio, you can be really inspired today. And in certain cases, other people may notice how inspired you are. I know that many Scorpios at the moment may feel that they don't want to be in the center of things, that they don't want too much social interaction. But if you have a chance to talk, and to talk freely, and to tell people about your ideas, you might be able to say things which are really incredible. You may not know how incredible they are, and sometimes the mere act of talking, of explaining something to someone, just allows these ideas to just come together, and they realize that you're onto something, and you realize you're onto something. But it's not just about the spoken word; it could be about the written word, something you write. You can write something. If you have an idea, write it down. It might not make much sense right now, but if you write it down, you've got a record of what you were thinking, and perhaps when you look at what you've written down in a couple of days' time, you will see how perhaps you are really quite inspired. So it's a complicated day, Scorpio, but I do think there are real opportunities to further your own interests, and also to start to bring ideas out into the open. Sagittarius. I'm talking a lot today about the Mars-Jupiter square, and of course the reason I'm talking about the Mars-Jupiter square is because today it is exact. And so, this Mars-Jupiter square is likely to affect you. So, one can regard you as being Jupiter in Cancer and Mars as being perhaps the irritant, as something stirring you up, as something annoying you, or perhaps something that is inspiring you. And Mars might be as something happens, something someone says, the people around you. It could well be about the people around you. Mars is in Libra. Libra is a very sociable sign, and so if you're in contact with other people, they might get through to you, and you kind of don't want them to get through to you. There may be a feeling, Sagittarius, that you want to keep something to yourself, and you have your own boundaries, and you're looking after these boundaries, and you want to be self-contained, but something might get through to you, and it might well be disruptive, and it might sort of stir you up, and you might be thinking that you have to do something that you didn't really want to do, and you could start to have, through another person's unwitting intervention. I don't think anyone is necessarily going to be deliberately trying to mess with you, but just something someone says, something someone does, it does give you pause for thought, and you start to think about the future, your future, and when you start to think about the future, that can be irritating. It can be disturbing, thinking about the future. In some ways, none of us like to think about the future because we just don't know. And being a Sagittarius, you perhaps have to tune into your powers of imagination. So to imagine, what the future can be like. And it's tempting when you look at the future to regard it as being something that you really can't do anything about. The future is just out there. It's this monstrous force, and it just forces you along. You're forced to accept it. You can't resist it. You can't put the clock back. You're not 1 second. The clock is always going forward. But it's important, Sagittarius, that you don't regard yourself as a passive player when looking at the future. And this Mars-Jupiter square that I've been talking about, it does link with Mercury, and you can see this. Mercury is still very tied up with them. We've got this Mercury-Jupiter, we've got a Mercury-Uranus square still, and Mars and Jupiter are aspecting the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. I mean, Jupiter is conjunct the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. So, there's Mercury, there is Uranus, and there you can see Jupiter in the middle. So Jupiter is quite inspired by Mercury and Uranus, and so the Mercury and Uranus energy is about insights. It's about getting ideas about the future, and it's not just anything passive, you being told how the future is going to unfold. It's about you starting to understand how you can impact the future, because you have ideas. And these ideas can be sort of quite high level, because Mars is square the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, Jupiter is conjunct the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. So the ideas are very much there, and you have an idea about how you are able to influence things. And you might think at first that there is really nothing you can do, that it is a situation that you don't have any control over. But that's, in a way, the easy choice. But you have a choice to decide that you're powerless. But you don't have to make that choice. You can decide that you're going to actually harness the power of Jupiter conjunct the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, and be inspired, have an idea, and then work out how you're going to put that idea into practice, and how you're going to really create a future that you feel comfortable with. Capricorn, there is this Mars-Jupiter square, which I've been talking about quite a lot, and I think that this Mars-Jupiter square is something that it's going to be quite difficult for you to avoid. I mean, Mars is in Libra, Mars is in a cardinal sign, Jupiter is in Cancer, another cardinal sign, and you can look at the world and you can see what's going on in the world, and you can see how it's all impacting you. You are being impacted, you are being influenced, and part of you, you don't want to be influenced, but there are big events unfolding, and you have to sort of work out how best to respond to them. And if you ignore them, if you just say that this is outside your sphere of interest, then these things are out of control, and they can influence you in many different ways. And so perhaps what you have to do is make some effort to take control of the Mars square Jupiter, to understand how it is working, and also to perhaps understand what other people are doing. So you might see in the first instance this Mars-Jupiter square operating through other people's behavior, other people's actions, maybe people you know, maybe people you read about. And so it would be a good idea to try to really understand what is going on. Ask yourself some questions, and you should be able to ask yourself questions now. And one reason for that is that Saturn is out of Aries. It's in Pisces, and it's retrograde. But the advantage of Saturn being retrograde in Pisces from a Capricorn view is that you have an ability to go back over old ground. You can go back to the root of things, and you can start to understand the beginnings of other people's motivations. And it's not just about people it's about the whole world. And remember, Saturn is very, very close to the Aries point. I mean, it may be in Pisces, but it's still close enough to the Aries point to give you an understanding of what's happening on this planet on which you live, and to really understand how the various actors are operating. And so that might be the main task, to just ask yourself why, and to understand what people are doing, and what groups of people are doing as well. And so with that insight, I think that you're going to be able to really give yourself the opportunity not just to understand, but also to respond, and to position yourself in such a way that you can deal with the chaos. And it's nothing personal here. Everyone is concerned about the chaos, but things are changing, very quickly, and you understand that, or should understand that, more than others. And Capricorn, I think at the moment you're prepared to ask questions that other people are afraid of, and you can deal with things which are difficult, which are disturbing, that may relate to decay, disruption, maybe even death. But I mean, I'm not making any bad predictions here. It's just what you're prepared to deal with, what you can deal with. And I think your ability to deal with things that other people won't even consider, does, in the end, give you quite an advantage. And it also gives you knowledge and wisdom. Aquarius. The moon is still in Aquarius. It's right in the middle of Aquarius. Certainly, if you set the chart for New York at noon, the moon is at 16 degrees 21 Aquarius. Doesn't matter where you are today, the moon is in Aquarius. And so, with the moon in your sign, making a trine to Mars, I think that you're feeling quite good about yourself, and you understand what's happening, and additionally you're quite open-minded, perhaps more open-minded than usual, and you're aware of the various possibilities, and you can see how things can work out, and you're possibly also quite curious. You want to explore and ask questions, and that is all for the good. And if you look at Saturn, which is your ruler, Saturn is very close to the Aries point, and because Saturn is close to the Aries point, you have a fundamental understanding of the way things are going, the way things are moving, and nothing much surprises you. So in a sense, you're almost connected with the spirit of the world, and so because you're connected with the spirit of the world, how surprised can you be? Can you take advantage of it? Well, possibly you can take advantage of it. I mean, Saturn is your ruler is now in Pisces, and of course it stays in Pisces, I think, until February. And so with Saturn in Pisces, you perhaps have the opportunity to benefit in a material way from your understanding of what is happening in the world. I mean, I'm not saying you have to do anything today, but it just might be something to think about, over the next couple of weeks while Saturn is very close to the Aries point. And your ability to understand, of course, it's helped by the fact that the moon is in Aquarius. It's all very familiar. One thing that might be something of an irritation is the fact that the moon is opposition Venus. And of course, Venus is in Leo. Venus is in your opposite sign. So with moon opposition Venus, you might be curious. You might be interested in what's happening around you. You may have an understanding of what's happening around you. But when it comes to people and individual people, they might just be something of an irritation. Perhaps someone wants your attention, and you don't really want to give them your attention, and that that could spoil the day. It is possible if you're spending too much time on another person, but possibly you shouldn't take the situation too seriously. Let other people have them, or not necessarily other people in general, but let one or two people, they have their moments. You can perhaps listen to them for a few minutes, let them vent, say something nice to them. Venus is in Leo. Venus in Leo might represent a person who is very receptive to flattery. So you acknowledge someone's existence, and that's enough. And then you can start getting on with the day and getting on with the opportunities of the day. And I think it is a day when you can expand your horizons and learn about what's going on, and also, in some cases, ask difficult questions. Some people are just in denial, and by asking difficult questions, you can start to understand, what's it all about? What is the real sort of root of the matter? And your ability to deal with unpleasantness may work to your advantage. Pisces. the moon is in Aquarius, so it's getting ready to move into Pisces. So by tomorrow the moon will be moving into Pisces, but it's not there yet. And so with the moon in Aquarius, you might be of the view that you don't necessarily want to participate. And why would you want to participate, at least on first sight? Because there is a lot going on today. I mean, we've got Mars making a square to Jupiter, but this Mars square Jupiter could be too much of a good thing. A lot happening, but the question is, is it going anywhere? And you may observe the world around you and think that this is too much, and if you were to participate, then you might just get caught up in something that you just don't want to be involved in. And if you take that approach, I think that the approach of keeping a distance, I think that is okay. I think that perhaps is the right approach, because you are at the moment very aware of your own boundaries, and you don't want anything to sort of spill over and sort of flood you out. And so putting down those emotional sandbags in preparation for a potential flood, put down some emotional sandbags, and that can kind of protect you to some extent from what is going on around you. But you can't entirely seal yourself off. And why would you want to seal yourself off anyway? Because at the moment, Pisces, Mars is square Jupiter. And yes, there is the irritation of Mars being square Jupiter, but also there is the opportunity of Mars square Jupiter. And Mars square Jupiter is giving you the opportunity to understand, to think. And at the moment, Pisces, your brain is really very active. Mars and Jupiter, well, they're on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. I mean, Jupiter, your ruler, is conjunct the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. Mars is aspecting, I think it's square the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. And so that could stir you up. That could stir your brain up. And it's a time when you could have lots of ideas about what you can do. Ideas which could be very creative, which you might be able to put into action in the near future. Not today, but perhaps over the next couple of weeks, you can put these ideas into action. And now you're realizing what is possible. And how is this the case? Well, maybe from behind your barricades, from behind the sandbags, you're seeing what's going on, and you're watching other people acting, and this is inspiring. You're not just a passive spectator. You're interacting mentally with what is happening, and you may be able to also talk about it if you have people around you who are on your wavelength. And when you start talking about something, you realize that you have a real understanding. And so if you know that you understand something, then you can be more confident that when the time comes to act, that you'll be able to get it right. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 35, which is progress. So for all of us, it can be a time when we feel that we can make progress. And so we're thinking about, what we can do, what we can achieve. And we don't necessarily have to reach our ultimate goal, but we can take those first steps. I mean, at least that's how it feels. And there may be some new openings, and perhaps we're also influenced by the fact that Mars is square Jupiter today. And so Mars square Jupiter I've been going on and on about Mars square Jupiter. Mars square Jupiter is really encouraging many of us to take action. We feel action is necessary. We're almost pressured to take action. And so, with progress, it may not be a very relaxed thing because of that Mars square Jupiter. Maybe I shouldn't be mixing up the astrology and the I Ching, but we just feel that something has to give. But the question is, what happens when we start to move forward? And there is some possibility that as we move forward, things aren't necessarily that easy. We have the first line moves, the second line moves. So the bottom line can be the beginning of an action. And it can often represent action which maybe comes too early. So, we try to make progress. I mean, it's okay, we're doing the right thing, but we shouldn't expect everything to be easy. And we're always going to have to keep in mind the end result. And also, what are our principles? Are we doing the right thing? Are we taking the right approach? But if we stick to our principles, then we will make some progress, but we can't expect complete progress. And the second line moves as well, and that suggests that we're trying to do the right thing, but it is difficult, and it's and we're almost kind of waiting for that moment. We're beginning something, but we're not there yet, and so we do have to wait. Now, the I Ching, by the way, with the second line moving, we're talking about progress, and this may just be some sort of random thought or something that I Ching says. It talks about grandmothers. I don't know how grandmothers are relevant here. So maybe when you think about progress and what you're trying to achieve, maybe you need to think about your grandmother. Now, I understand that your grandmother may well be dead. She may have been dead for a very long time. She may have died before you were born even. But think about your grandmother, and think about what your grandmother was trying to do in her life, and what your grandmother might be saying to you. And I know this is a random thought, but I do have a sort of a responsibility to tell you what the I Ching is saying, and it does talk about grandmothers. So think about your family history and what your grandmother might have done in this particular situation, and how what you are facing might relate perhaps to what she was facing decades ago, or if you have memories of her, think about the advice she might be giving you. But the overall message here with progress is that it is slow, and you may not get where you want to go, certainly not today. And this is further emphasized when we look at the second hexagram, and the second hexagram is hexagram number 38, which is opposition. And so as we try to move forward, there is resistance, and we don't get the support we were hoping for. And this might mean that if we really want to get anything done, we might have to do it on our own. If we're counting on someone else's help, that help might not be there, and we might just realize how different we are from other people, that we have different priorities. We thought everyone was on the same wavelength, and now we realize that this is not necessarily the case. And so we now have to perhaps take quite a solitary path. And if we are counting on other people to help us make progress, we might just have to assume that they're going to resist what we're doing, or they might just hold back. They might not be as enthusiastic as we are. They might have their doubts, and so that could grind us to a halt. I mean, I don't think this is the end of the world, and the more we do things on our own, then I think the easier it's going to be. And now I want to turn to what happened in Portugal. So in Portugal, there was on Wednesday a major disaster in Lisbon. And I've never been to Portugal, and therefore I've never been to Lisbon. But apparently in Lisbon there is a thing called a furnicular. And a furnicular, I don't know what the technical definition of a furnicular is, but a furnicular is a sort of a car that goes or a carriage that goes up a steep hill. I think it's one in Paris, isn't there? At the Sacré-Cœur, is there a furnicular there? I seem to remember that when I was a child visiting Paris. And so, steep hill in Lisbon. This carriage is at the top of the hill, and apparently as one carriage goes up, there's another carriage going down, and they sort of balance each other, and there are cables, and there was a derailment, and this derailment, this carriage went all the way down the hill and smashed into a building. And at first they said that 15 people had been killed, but I've read that up to 17 people have been killed. So a lot of people were killed, and it happened in Portugal's capital city. So it was a big event. And I think that it happened at 6:05 in the evening, and which would, I assume, would have been the rush hour. So here is the chart of the derailment. So it happened Wednesday, September the 3rd, 2025. And it happened. I think it happened at 6:05 in the evening in Lisbon. So, what does this chart tell us? Well, Pluto is rising, and so Pluto rising. Well, you don't normally associate Pluto with accidents. I mean, I know that Pluto can be a difficult planet, but I wouldn't have said that you can just always say Pluto. No, Pluto rising. You don't want to read too much into that. Perhaps it's more important that Uranus is trine the ascendant, and so with Uranus trine the ascendant, Uranus is the planet of accidents. Uranus is in the 4th house. Okay, it's not exactly conjunct the IC, but trine the ascendant, and Uranus is trine Pluto. So you might say that this Uranus trine Pluto is making itself apparent at this particular place. This place in Lisbon, perhaps you regard the ascendant as the place, and additionally, the accident happened at the time of a T-square. The T-square is something I was talking about. I made no effort to make any prediction about where on Earth this T-square would manifest at the time. But there we have Moon opposition Jupiter square Mars, and so that means that sort of Jupiter is semi-square the Moon Mars midpoint. But it's not an easy T-square, Moon opposition Jupiter. Something having to give, maybe. Moon opposition Jupiter with Mars on the T. So that tells us something about the general atmosphere, the general environment, and we can look at the 90-degree dial. Again, not saying that the 90-degree dial is necessarily going to pick up on anything, but when you look at a 90-degree dial, it's always worth looking at the midheaven and the ascendant, because the midheaven and the ascendant are very particular to the place it happened. I mean, you could see, for example, this this T-square, moon opposition Jupiter with Mars on the T. And sure, it's great in hindsight that this happened. I mean, not great, but you can see it in hindsight. But what makes it special to Lisbon? So here is the ascendant on the 90-degree dial for Lisbon, which is conjunct Pluto. And we see a few things of interest here. And I think that what is of interest is we have, at the time, there was a Mercury-Uranus conjunction. Mercury-Uranus square. Now, on a 90-degree dial, a Mercury-Uranus square is shown as a Mercury-Uranus conjunction. I mean, that's the way the 90-degree dial works. It's a fourth harmonic chart. And likewise, we've got the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. That is a bit wide, but it's still there. So you could say that the ascendant is forming a symmetry around the Mercury-Uranus square on one hand and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on the other hand. So we can certainly see that after the event, and there is the ascendant on the Saturn-Uranus midpoint. It's on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. There it is on Mercury-Saturn, Mercury-Neptune. So I think that's quite noticeable from a 90-degree dial, but still we're looking at it from a perspective of hindsight. I don't think that we could predict that just simply on the basis of the planets and at that particular time. I can also look at the midheaven, just see if that tells us anything. So the midheaven is on it's on the Saturn-Hades midpoint, and to the midheaven on the Saturn-Hades midpoint. Saturn is a restriction, death, midheaven on there. That tells us perhaps something about that time at 6:05 in the evening. But again, this is all through the perspective of hindsight. Now, another way of looking at this accident would be to consider the new moon prior. Because, when you have a new moon, what you can do is as I always do with a new moon, I do the astrocartography. I ask sort of where on earth would you expect that new moon to have maximum impact? Now, I'm afraid I didn't say anything about Portugal, but perhaps I was careless there. Perhaps I could have highlighted Portugal as being a potential place of danger. So let me show you why. So here is the new moon on August the 23rd, 2025. I have relocated it to Lisbon. So there's the new moon set for Lisbon, and so it's at 0 degrees 23 Virgo. So the ascendant was 1 degree 12 Virgo in Lisbon at the time of the new moon. So the new moon was exactly rising. And okay, that in itself doesn't tell us very much. I mean, so what if a new moon is exactly rising? But then you have to look at Uranus. Uranus was at 1 degree 23. So Uranus was square the new moon. So we knew with that new moon on the 23rd that it was square Uranus. But the question is, where on earth would that moon-Uranus square have actually hit home? And the fact that the new moon was square the ascendant, the new moon was on the ascendant, square Uranus, might give us some hints there. And by the way, at this new moon, true black moon Lilith was on the IC. So I think if I had been a Portuguese astrologer looking at this new moon and really concerned about what was going on in Portugal, I think I might have highlighted something bad, potentially bad happening to the country. But I'm not a Portuguese astrologer. I'm afraid I don't have as much interest in Portugal as I should have. So I just sort of glossed over it, and we can look at the astrocartography of this. So if we do an astromap and we set this astromap for Europe, so there's Europe and so you can see that this is the place. These are all the places where Uranus was on the midheaven at the time of the new moon. But this is where the new moon was. Where the new moon was conjunct the ascendant, and so this yellow line was pretty close to Lisbon. I mean, almost as sort of close as it gets. I mean, okay, it wasn't exactly going through Lisbon, and so having looked at this, I think one should have been able to spot it, and I think if one had have been a Portuguese astrologer, one would have highlighted this. And remember, this accident happened on September the 3rd. The new moon was on 23rd, was on August the 23rd, and so the accident happened nearly a fortnight later. So the way you would phrase this would be to say, oh, well, sometime in the fortnight following the new moon, and we're in that fortnight period at the moment, you might expect something bad to happen in Portugal. Now that's a bit vague, but then new moon square Uranus, you could have said an accident of some kind. Then you would have had to, how would you have then brought it down to the level of a furnicular? I don't know, but one perhaps could have done some more work on it. And so perhaps when you're looking at astrology, you need to look at your individual country and the country that is relevant to you. I mean, I think that some people watch this from Portugal, and so maybe in future just keep a closer eye on astrocartography and other things that are going on, wherever your country is. And now I want to look at the Mars-Jupiter square. So here is the chart of the Mars-Jupiter square. I've said a lot about the Mars-Jupiter square, and I'm thinking that from a general perspective, this Mars-Jupiter square, it's something that it's pretty high energy. Jupiter is the planet of excess. There is Jupiter in Cancer. It wants to take things further. Now that might be a good thing, to want to take things further, but you can go too far. And there is Mars in Libra square Jupiter. It's interesting that Jupiter is exalted, but Mars is in its detriment. So you could argue that Mars is weaker than Jupiter. Maybe that suggests that the Mars-Jupiter square might not be such a bad thing. I think it still could be problematic, and it could you could really stir things up, and it just encourage people to just take things too far. And if you want sort of further information about Mars square Jupiter, you can look at the midpoint tree or rather you can look at Mars and Jupiter on the 90-degree dial. So here is Mars and Jupiter. There it is. They're in the same place. I mean, I know they're square, but on a 90-degree dial, they're shown as a conjunction. And so, by looking at the Mars-Jupiter tree and what midpoints it's on, so it's on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. So there is Mercury, there is Uranus. So Mars and Jupiter on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, and that may say something about how this Mars-Jupiter square could be working. Now, when I was going through the 12 signs just now, I was suggesting to many of the signs that it is a time to think about your brain, to think about your ideas, and Mercury Uranus is about ideas. having wonderful ideas, especially as Mercury-Uranus is making a square. Okay, the ideas may not always be wonderful; they might be disturbing, but we can be quite inspired. In fact, all of us can be inspired, and so maybe that is a way that we can really, make the most of this this Mars-Uranus square. And I mean, there are other midpoints to consider. The Uranus Admetos midpoint. So it's on the Mercury-Uranus and the Uranus Admetos midpoint. So that might give us some extra information. Mercury Admetos. Admetos can be the planet of delay. Admetos was a Greek king who didn't want to die, and he wanted someone else to take his place. And he did get someone else to take his place. So delaying the inevitable. So that might create some extra tension here. We have ideas, but we don't necessarily know what we're going to do with them. We want to put them on hold, but we can't put them on hold because of this Mars-Jupiter square. But maybe we shouldn't worry too much about the Mercury-Admetos midpoint. Maybe let's just focus on the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. So, do try to be as inspired as possible. And if you have ideas, over the next couple of days, write them down. You may not be immediately able to put them into practice, but the opportunity might come about, sooner or later. And finally, I just want to look at a few people who have Mars square Jupiter in their horoscope, and so I will start with Nayib Bukele. He's the president of El Salvador. I look at his chart quite a lot, and he has Mars. He has interest. It's interesting with Nayib Bukele. He has Mars square Saturn, and he has Mars square Jupiter. Now, Nayib Bukele was born on the day of a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. That Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the summer of 1981, just before the royal wedding, when Charles married Diana. And so he was born with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and so he's got Mars square that. And here is someone who is really high profile, who's really pushes himself into the limelight, even though he is president of a very small country. He has had a huge influence. I mean, people have seen his country in some ways as a model. I mean, it depends on your political views. I mean, for example, he has completely reduced the crime rate in El Salvador to being one of the lowest crime rates in the Americas. And how has he done that? Well, he's done that by just putting all the gangs into prison. I mean, that might not seem very pleasant, but if you're an ordinary resident of El Salvador, well, it does make life easier if you're able to walk around freely. You're not in danger. The murder rate has collapsed. So he's done it through something very, very over the top. And of course, he's made Bitcoin one of the nation's accepted currencies. I mean, El Salvador doesn't have its own currency. It uses a dollar, but it now uses a Bitcoin as well. And he is someone who has been fated, certainly by the right, by sort of many conservatives and libertarians, regard Bukele as being completely amazing. And so, but you can see how that Mars square the Jupiter is working. Really, he feels he needs to take things really to the next level. There's no limits to him. And perhaps he's also picking up on something quite collective because he was born on the day of a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So I would have said on balance, you could say that he is demonstrating perhaps the positive side of the Mars square Saturn. And looking at the negative side, someone infamous who has been been in the news in the US a lot recently is Bran Kohberger. So Bran Kohberger was the PhD student in, he was in Pullman in Washington State, and he crossed the border to Moscow, Idaho, and he killed 4 students in their beds, just broke into their house and used incredible violence. He just stabbed them to death, and the house was just sort of covered in blood. And he has, or had, I mean, no, he's still alive. He's been sentenced. He's spending the rest of his life in prison, and so he has, Mars in Leo square Jupiter. So Mars in Leo might be his own arrogance and his belief in himself, and feeling he has to do something to show his own power. I mean, we don't really know why he did it exactly. There are all sorts of theories. But so Mars square Jupiter in Scorpio, he had a fixed plan. He was going to be in fixed signs. He was going to do it. He was going to kill these students. He planned it. He broke into the house. He succeeded, and he used incredible violence. And I'm afraid that can be a way in which Mars square Jupiter could work. I mean, I don't know, how one does it. I mean, particularly if he hadn't killed before. I mean, it seems extraordinary to use that level of violence. And there are other examples of killers. This one from Poland. Kajetan Karol Poznanski. Now he's in prison, and I think he had an Italian class, and I think he beheaded his Italian teacher, and then he went on a run around Europe, and I don't know his time of birth, but he has Mars at noon. I think he was born in Poznan in Poland, and his Mars was at 10 degrees 58 Libra, is at 10:58 Libra, his Jupiter at 10 degrees 3 Cancer. So he had a fairly close Mars-Jupiter square. And so this Mars-Jupiter square encourages him to sort of extreme acts of violence. And, like Bran Kohberger, he was well educated. I think his mother was a judge, or is a judge, and so he wrote sort of at university. I think he wrote pieces about his attitudes to death. So he was quite intellectual, I think, about death. And then, Mars square Jupiter, he felt he had to do it. He had to behead this Italian teacher. And so, as with Bran Kohberger, we see an incredible act of violence. So there we're seeing, Mars square Uranus, and at its absolute worst. Now, continuing on the theme of Poland, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk has Mars square Jupiter. So he's got Mars again within 1 degree of each other. Now I don't really know enough about Donald Tusk or Poland to suggest how that Mars-Jupiter is going to work, but at some level, he may want to sort of take things too far. It's perhaps worrying that you've got the Prime Minister of Poland, that and you've got this war with Ukraine, and you've got these worries about escalation. I mean, Mars square Jupiter can be about escalation, and he might want to sort of escalate things. Although his Mars is in Gemini, his Jupiter is in Virgo, it's in mutable signs. So I don't think that Mars square Jupiter is going to be as problematic as if it was in, say, cardinal and particularly like fixed signs, as we saw with Bran Kohberger. So he's not necessarily totally determined on destroying his country by going to war with Russia or anything like that. I don't think that's necessarily how it's going to work with Mars square Jupiter, and that Mars square Jupiter in Donald Tusk's chart might be more scattered moving from one thing to another and another, and not necessarily being totally obsessed about anything. And as far as American politics are concerned, yeah, Kamala Harris. So here's Kamala Harris's chart. She has Mars in Leo and Jupiter in Taurus, and it's difficult to know how that Mars-Jupiter square is working with Kamala Harris. I mean, you could say, on a positive note, that she put a lot of energy into her political career, but every politician does that. I don't think that Kamala Harris is known for being particularly single-minded or obsessive, and so I'm not sure I can completely relate to this Mars-Jupiter square in the way you saw with certainly with Bukele or Koberger or Poznansky. It might be with Mars-Jupiter square that she's projecting it, because Mars. Okay, in this case, you're dealing with a female chart, and so possibly a woman is going to deal with Mars-Jupiter square differently from a man. So Mars, she may be projecting that onto someone else, the men in her life, perhaps the men who have helped her with her career, and so it may not be quite so personal in a female chart, a Mars square Jupiter. Though another American female politician is Kristi Noem. Now, Mars square Jupiter, is she projecting that? Well, she's got, where's her Mars? Her Mars is at 13 Pisces, Jupiter at 15 Sagittarius. Her father died in a grain elevator accident. That apparently had a big effect on her. So Mars is a male planet, Mars in Pisces. Maybe that says something about her father's accident, but it may also say something about her. I mean, she's quite an over-the-top person. Remember, she's infamous for, in her biography or autobiography, saying how she shot her dog and then she shot her goat because they weren't behaving. That's quite Mars-Jupiter behavior. There is the killing aspect, and excessive killing. I mean, it may not just be people, it can be animals. And she's pursuing her job in terms of dealing with sort of immigration in a very sort of zealous way. I think she's been lampooned for it somewhat by South Park. So I mean, I think that she might be a good example of Mars Jupiter of a Mars Jupiter square. Now, Mars Jupiter can be about excessive behavior, just doing something in a completely excessive way and you don't know when to stop. And Eben Byers, I talk about Eben Byers occasionally. Eben Byers was I think he came from a fairly wealthy background, and he was born in 1880, and he has his Mars at 0 degrees Cancer, square Jupiter in Aries. So I think he was into sports. He liked playing golf, and he got a leg injury after the First World War, and he was looking for some relief from his leg injury. And it was recommended to him that he take a radium solution, so there would be little bottles of, I think, water impregnated with radium, and he just thought they were great, and he just kept taking them. He would order boxes and boxes and boxes of these things, and that might be Mars Jupiter square. Just once you get into something, you just keep going. And, you can see ghastly pictures of him before he died. His jaw collapsed because of a radium. It was kind of same time as the Radium Girls. And so excessive behavior, just getting into one thing and just completely going for it, can say something about having a Mars Jupiter square. And Finally, Curtis LeMay had Mars-Jupiter square. Now, Curtis LeMay was an American Air Force general who was, I think, responsible for the firebombing of Tokyo. He was an advocate of a preemptive nuclear strike on the Soviet Union in the 40s. In that window when the United States had the atomic bomb, but the Soviet Union didn't. And I think one of the characters in Doctor Strangelove might have been modelled on Curtis LeMay. He did stand to be vice president. I think when Wallace in the 1968 election, I think when Wallace was standing as a sort of the right-wing old Democrat Party, and sort of upset about the laws against segregation, and so he did stand as I think he stood as Wallace's vice president. But with Mars square Jupiter, that is an aspect. Let's just bomb them. Just bomb them out of existence. And okay, you could say that the firebombings of Tokyo might have contributed to Tokyo's surrender, and indeed just the whole thing about being an Air Force general in charge of bombing. That's Mars square Jupiter, and wanting to use bombing in the Cold War to bomb the Soviet Union with nuclear weapons. That really does fit. Finally, I want to just talk about two charts which may or may not be impacted by this Mars square Jupiter, and that is the horoscope of that's Vladimir Putin and Imran Khan. Why do I pair the two? Because Vladimir Putin and Imran Khan were born very close to one another. So Vladimir Putin was born on October the 7th, 1952. Imran Khan was born on October the 5th, 1952. I know that people claim they've got times for both of these, but I'm not convinced. I don't have a confirmed time for either. And the thing about Imran Khan and Vladimir Putin, I mean, they both have Uranus-Saturn squares. So there is Imran Khan's Uranus at 18 degrees 22 Cancer and his Saturn at 1713 Libra. And likewise, Vladimir Putin has his Uranus pretty much in the same place, Uranus 18 degrees 24 Cancer, and Saturn at 1728 Libra. So Vladimir Putin and Imran Khan, Vladimir Putin is going to have Jupiter on his Uranus. Imran Khan is going to have Jupiter on his Uranus. And they're both going to have Mars on their Saturns, approximately. So the Mars-Uranus squares hits their Saturn-Uranus squares, and it's quite possible that we will never know how this works, because things are quite secretive in the Kremlin, and well, of course Imran Khan, he's in a different situation. He's in prison. He's just been sentenced to was sentenced to, I don't know what he was sentenced to. I mean, it was basically a politically motivated charge to sort of get him out of the way. And he's still active. I mean, he's making tweets asking Pakistanis to contribute. On September the 2nd, he was able to get a tweet out asking Pakistanis to rally together to sort out there was a flood, but it was fairly lengthy what he was coming up with. And he's got bail for some of his charges, but there's another charge he hasn't got bail for yet. So perhaps for Imran Khan, with Jupiter conjunct his Uranus, and I know Uranus is a transpersonal planet. For most people, they wouldn't necessarily feel Uranus transits to their Uranus. But if you're Imran Khan or Vladimir Putin, then I think that you might well feel it, and because you are of collective importance. And so Imran Khan with Jupiter on his Uranus, maybe that's an opportunity here. Jupiter conjunct Uranus can be about freedom. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be set free, but it might be about him seeing a new opportunity. But of course Mars is square his Saturn, so it does his Saturn-Uranus square and the tension of that Mars Saturn-Uranus square is really brought out into the open by this Mars-Jupiter by this Mars-Jupiter square. So Imran Khan might be someone to look at perhaps over the next week, and it's going to be perhaps more likely to see if anything's going on with Imran Khan than with Vladimir Putin, because obviously with Vladimir Putin he's got the protection of the Kremlin, and who knows what he's doing. I think, is he still in China? Because he went to China's sort of victory celebrations when it defeated Japan in 1945, and so Putin's Saturn-Uranus is brought out into the open by this Mars-Jupiter square. It might be some decision he makes, maybe some news he gets. I mean, there is always a danger with Mars-Jupiter square hitting his, so I mean, he probably has to, watch out for sort of attacks, and Ukraine is going to be champing at the bit to get some attention. I mean, that's Ukraine, to fire some missiles at Russia, anything to change the narrative that it's losing the war. So Putin might have to be careful there, personal safety there, but he might feel that he has to do something. He suddenly sees that something has to be done. So that might be how the Mars-Jupiter square works. So those are two people who we should perhaps be looking at over the next week, Vladimir Putin and Imran Khan. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.